Well, hello. Welcome to the first Gray Area Live podcast right here on YouTube. Of course, my name is Kevin Gray. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to hit that subscribe button right there for all things Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube. You can catch me on your home of the Dallas Cowboys and Texas Rangers, 105.3 The Fan. So, yeah, this is my first live The Gray Area podcast. You can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcast for free. Make sure you write a review for the podcast. Give it a 5-star rating. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, appreciate you taking the time to write a review for the podcast and giving it a 5-star rating. If you're here on YouTube, make sure you leave a comment and I'll be sure to read it. Try to get to it as fast as I can. And let's have some conversation here on the Gray Area podcast. Obviously, it's a big time in the NBA playoffs. You got the NBA draft, the Dallas Cowboys. If you got any questions, throw them up in the chat. Let's chat and let's have some fun here on the Gray Area podcast. Now, if you know me, you know how much I get down when it comes to flaming Catboy and Stephen Jones and the Dallas Cowboys. It's a specialty of mine if you listen to me on the airwaves or you've seen my act on Twitter and what I do and getting after the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys are in position with the number 24 overall pick in this year's NFL draft to make their team better. We know this has been a disastrous offseason so far for the Dallas Cowboys with all the things they dealt from a PR perspective with Jerry Jones and all of the lawsuits, the illegitimate child that may or may not be his, or all the things going on with the Rich Dalrymple situation. Everything that has happened this offseason for the Dallas Cowboys from a PR standpoint has been a disaster. So, hey, we'll see if they actually do something to make us forget about some of those things so far that has happened this offseason. From DJ Dog 31, Cowboys rumored to be moving up in the draft with one player they are targeting. Do you have an idea of what player they are targeting? I wish I knew. Obviously, we've heard names like Drake London, maybe Chris Olave, Charles Cross, the offensive tackle. Maybe they're moving up to possibly draft one of those guys. The Cowboys have put themselves in a spot where they need a wide receiver. They need offensive line help. They could use a defensive end. When Stephen Jones gets out here and says that, you know, there are only 14 to 16 first-round graded players that we have on our board, that's kind of scary. What's up, Saad? What's up, Carson? Appreciate the love here on YouTube on the Gray Area podcast. Feel free to drop in, you know, a super chat. I'll make sure I get to that. If you want to drop in a super chat, super sticker, appreciate that. If you want to drop one of those in there as well. Again, doing this for the very first time on YouTube. So hopefully you'll enjoy what we've got going on here as far as the Gray Area podcast live here on Kevin Gray Sports on YouTube. Again, don't forget to hit that subscribe button while you're here also. But yeah, the Cowboys got a lot of needs that they got to address. Appreciate it, Pat. Appreciate you joining us here on YouTube, live right here on the Gray Area podcast. The Cowboys got to address wide receiver. They got to address the offensive line, defensive end, maybe a sneaky need with linebacker. We know that they brought back, obviously, Leighton Vander Esch and some other guys when it comes to their linebacking core, but the linebacking room is a little thin as well. And obviously, with the departures of Randy Gregory and Amari Cooper and La'el Collins, among others, they've got to find a way to address these positions. And if they decide to move up, what's it going to cost you to try to get up into the top 13 or 14 picks? Maybe you do something with Houston, who's sitting there at 13. Obviously, they've got 2 first-round picks in this year's NFL draft. They got picks at 3 and at 13 from side, pretty much O-line or Olave, I think. I think the Cowboys are falling in love with one of these wide receivers. We heard from many an insider, of course, Bobby Belt of 105.3 The Fan, talking about the idea that they could be moving up for an offensive tackle or for a wide receiver. They've got to do something to address each of those positions. Now, if you stay there at 24, you still should get a pretty good player when it comes to the offensive line, whether it be Zion Johnson, possibly Kenyon Green, Tyler Linderbaum, if they decide to go down that route. There should be good players there at 24. But we heard your man, Jerry Jones, talk about, just a couple of weeks ago that, hey, of course, love to go up to number 24 or go up into the NFL draft, trade up from number 24 to see what we could possibly do there. And if all the rumors that are starting to circulate, you're starting to hear a lot of fire behind some of these rumors about the idea that the Cowboys are going to move up in this year's NFL draft. We will see, because they've got a lot of issues that they've got to address going forward in this NFL draft. They've got 9 picks in this year's draft, so they should be able to find some good players there. Of course, they got the first round pick at number 24, in the second round at 56, in round 3 at number 88. They should be able to get some good football players. And then obviously as you get into days 2 and 3, being able to provide you with some depth in a NFL draft that, I don't know about you, there really hasn't been that consensus number 1 guy out there that you look at and say, he's going to be that dude. He's going to be that consensus number 1 overall pick. The Jacksonville Jaguars are banting about 3 to 4 names with the number 1 overall pick. When you think about teams like the Jets, the Giants, the Saints, they've got multiple first-round picks in this year's NFL draft, including the Packers and also the Kansas City Chiefs. Both of those teams are going to be looking for wide receivers, obviously with the Packers moving on from Devontae Adams and the Chiefs moving on from Tyreek Hill. So in a wide receiver-rich class, there are going to be a lot of teams looking for playmakers, and maybe a team like the Jets who could take Drake London as high as number 4 in this year's draft. There's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be able to get a lot of value if they decide to trade back in the first round and maybe find a partner with the Dallas Cowboys to move up in the first round of the NFL draft. All of that remains to be seen. Obviously, the Cowboys have got to fix a lot of different things when it comes to this team, finding a playmaker on the outside for Dak Prescott. And one of the underrated parts of this whole conversation has been the idea that if you get an offensive lineman, it's going to help your running game. We saw in the second half of the year how bad the running game was, not just because of the offensive line and obviously Ezekiel Elliott running around with a torn PCL. Even your man, Tony Pollard, was out here with a torn plantar fascia. The running game is going to be so much better if you're able to solidify this offensive line, which should make things easier for one Rain Dakota Prescott from DJ Dog 31. The Saints may be a trading partner if we trade up, the Chiefs and the Lions if we trade back. That's also a possibility. The Texans are sitting there at 13. There's reports that they've been talking to, a half a dozen teams trying to see if there's a trade partner for them potentially in this year's draft. So a lot of things and a lot of rumors and a lot of things that could happen in this year's draft, given all the teams that have multiple first-round picks. And for a lot of teams, not a lot of first-round grades on guys. Now, there are certain guys that you look at in the first round that are going to be drafted within the top 10 to 15 picks. A guy like Sauce Gardner, the corner out of Cincinnati, who's been was absolutely phenomenal for them throughout his college career. Obviously, guys like Evan Neal, Ike Ekwonu, those 2 offensive tackles there, guys that are going to be nasty on the offensive line. Even a guy like Trevor Penning, who maybe the Cowboys may be in line for his services too if they decide to move up. We've heard a lot about Trevor Penning and the idea that he is a nasty dude on the offensive line, and the Cowboys have needed to get tougher along the offensive line. So obviously that could be the case as well if you look at the Cowboys and what they're trying to do potentially in the first round. Again, appreciate you joining me here on the Gray Area Podcast live right here on YouTube. Again, hit that subscribe button while you're there. We're going to get to some Mavericks talk here in just a little bit as the Mavericks look to close out the Utah Jazz in game number 6 of the NBA playoffs in the first round. But obviously all the talk right now is around the NFL draft. Again, find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports. Make sure you give me a follow there. But yeah, when you look at the top 10 of the first round of the NFL draft, you've got Jacksonville, Detroit, Houston, the Jets, the Giants, the Panthers, who could be looking at a quarterback. Hello, Malik Willis. You've got the Giants, the Falcons, then the Seahawks, and then the Jets round out the top 10. So you've got 2 teams in the Jets and the Giants that have 2 picks each within the first top 10. You got the Giants at 5 and 7, and then you got the Jets at 4 and 10. And then you start running down the next 5. Washington, Minnesota, the Texans back in at 13. You've got the Baltimore Ravens in there at 14, and the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, obviously, with the Cowboys being in the NFC East from Pat, yes, sir, MFFL. Yeah, I know we're going to get to some real Mavericks talk here in just a bit after they destroyed the Jazz in Game 5 of the Western Conference first round playoffs. The team that I'm looking at in the NFC East that could really improve themselves and a team that I think has gotten themselves much better this offseason is the New York Giants. The New York Giants hiring Brian Dable from the Buffalo Bills, obviously bringing in Wink Martindale as their new defensive coordinator. If somehow Dable can get something out of Daniel Jones, they've got some playmakers there, even though they're trying to move on maybe from Darius Slayton, and they've already made it known that they're going to try to move on from Kadarius Toney. They could be in the market for a wide receiver in the first 7 picks that they have in terms of the 5th and the 7th overall pick in this year's NFL draft. So that just gives you an idea of some of these teams who may be trying to add certain players. Maybe they go on the defensive side. We know Wink Martindale loves his safeties. A guy like Kyle Hamilton is sitting there, could be a talented safety for them coming out of Notre Dame. A lot of moving parts in the first round. Then you look at 16 through 20. You've got the Saints, the Chargers, the Eagles, and then the Saints again. The Saints got 2 picks in both 16 and 19. We'll see what they do there from DJ Jog 31. Malik Willis, in my opinion, should be the first quarterback taken. Pittsburgh has done a ton of work on scouting him. Maybe he does go as the first quarterback in this draft, but you got the Pittsburgh Steelers sitting there at 20. One thing that we know, one thing I've always said when it comes to quarterbacks in the National Football League, if you believe that that dude is your guy, you move heaven and earth to get that quarterback, because no one knows the value of a quarterback more than obviously each of these 32 NFL teams. They know what they need to do to try and find a quarterback. Jacob here on YouTube. Go off, Kevin. Hey, look, man, I'm going to eventually go off with Stephen Jones and the Dallas Cowboys as the show goes on. I've been trying to keep it a little bit more positive these days when it comes to Catboy and Stephen Jones and the Dallas Cowboys, man. I know this offseason was rough for them. I know they've gone through a lot, and I have not necessarily enjoyed the moves that the Cowboys have made so far in this year's offseason. But I'm trying to take a more positive approach, especially when it comes to the NFL draft. Maybe they can do something that at least gets my mind off as would have been a disastrous offseason so far for this Dallas Cowboys football team. So I'm going to choose the positive road for now, at least, to try and get myself in a little bit better mood going into the NFL draft on Thursday night. And let's see what they do throughout the entire weekend to maybe make me feel a little bit better. But as I was mentioning, you've got the Saints sitting there at 16 and 19. They've got a chance to improve their football team. You got the Pittsburgh Steelers at 20. You got the Patriots at 21. Then you got the Packers at 22. The Cardinals there at 23. And then, of course, the Cowboys come in at 24. So we'll see what happens, obviously, in the first round. It should be an intriguing first round of this year's NFL draft. A lot of moving parts, a lot of teams trying to figure out what they want to do. What does Jacksonville dare do at number 1? Do they take Walker? Do they take Hutchinson? I personally think they should take an offensive lineman. If you bring Doug Peterson in as your head coach to try and get this offense going with Trevor Lawrence and the playmakers that they have there that they believe can help make this offense better, why not be able to solidify that offensive line by taking one in the very first pick in this year's draft, whether it be Evan Neal or Ike Ekwonu or whatever you decide the case may be. So if you decide to do that, then you could potentially find yourself getting better as far as the offensive line is concerned. So if you can do that, you could be able to get better as a football team. All you have to do if you're the Dallas Cowboys, though, in this draft is make sure that you find yourself getting a offensive lineman that can help you, because that's where I want them to go. I want them to go offensive line to be able to make this team better. From DJ Jog 31, what player do you see falling in the first round? Penning, Nakobe Dean, Tyler Linderbaum. Nakobe Dean is one of my personal favorites. I love Nakobe Dean out of Georgia. I know he's a little bit on the smaller side, but that's my personal favorite going into the draft and for the Cowboys if they decide to go defense. It doesn't get much better than pairing Nakobe Dean alongside with Micah Parsons. I know Devin Lloyd is a guy that a lot of people love. They see him as a Micah Parsons light potentially. Nakobe Dean is my personal favorite when it comes to if they're going to go on defense in this year's NFL draft. So we'll see. The Cowboys have got a lot of things that they need to do to fix their team. They will have 9 picks in this year's NFL draft. but a lot of intrigue as you start thinking about what's going on when it comes to the Cowboys and all 32 NFL teams, multiple teams with first-round picks that are going to be having to decide what they want to do next going forward. Let's get into the Mavs a little bit. Obviously, we're going to talk plenty about the Cowboys, the NFL draft over the next few days. The Dallas Mavericks are where my bread and butter is because obviously I cover the Mavericks for 105 through the Fan, been covering them for a while now, and they are on the cusp of winning their first playoff series since they won the championship in 2011 from what's it, Classify 1 on YouTube. I apologize if I didn't get that right. My bad. As long as the likes of Doncic, Brunson, Kleba, Dinwiddie are all healthy and motivated, the Mavs are going to the finals. Ooh, going to the finals. Okay. For Jacob, love your stuff, man. Keep it going. Keep it consistent. Always love your opinions on this. Appreciate that, man. Try to do my best covering these Mavs. But yeah, I want to get back to that one comment there. As long as the likes of Doncic, Brunson, Kleba, Dinwiddie are all healthy and motivated, the Mavs are going to the finals. Ooh, that's a strong take right there. Look, here's what happens in the NBA playoffs generally. It's going through progressions. Teams go through things to get to certain spots, and there's a linear climb normally when it comes to the NBA playoffs. From IREQ Savage, Vocal Dinosaur, that's a long name. My dog going live now. Love your content. Hey, appreciate it. Appreciate it. Tell your friends, tell your family to jump on in. We're live with the Gray Area Podcast right here on YouTube. Again, you can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports. My name is Kevin Gray. You can find me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. Look, we're going to find out, man, because I love what defensively this team has done this season. Obviously, they held the Utah Jazz to 77 points in game number 5, holding them to their lowest point total of any half this season. Luka Doncic is back. He came out of the game clean again on game 5 after dropping 33 and 13. The 13 rebounds that he had were all defensive rebounds. This Mavericks team looks good, but remember, most teams when it comes to the NBA playoffs go through stages when it comes to building toward becoming a champion. Certain teams get to skip steps, like the Golden State Warriors from several years back, a team that skipped steps and was able to put themselves in position rather quickly to be able to ascend to winning a championship. The Mavericks, remember, haven't won a first-round series, haven't won a series at all since winning the championship in 2011. This team has gone through playoff wars over the last couple of years, losing in back-to-back years to the Los Angeles Clippers. I think they can draw on that experience going into game 6 on Thursday night. Obviously, Luka Doncic being healthy is a big plus for them. But I've been disappointed, though, in Spencer Dinwiddie so far in this series and the lack of production that you've gotten from him. You've seen him at times be pretty good in this series with attacking the rim, getting to the free throw line, but he has not been able to make a lot of outside shots. From Christopher Jones here on YouTube. How about trading THJ for a draft pick? I don't know, man. Look, it's really disappointing that we don't get to see Tim Hardaway Jr. in these playoffs, knowing how much of a leader he is on this team. And we know the ability that he has to shoot the ball from the three-point line. And the fact that he's out with this Jones fracture and not able to participate in the playoffs is really disappointing. We'll see what they do going into the summer. Obviously, with Spencer Dinwiddie, when you looked at it, I thought that Spencer Dinwiddie and Tim Hardaway Jr. would have made a sense for a trade for one another. Obviously, once Tim Hardaway Jr. got hurt, you weren't going to be able to move him. The earliest you can move him, if you want to, is this coming summer. But they've got some real decisions to make. Obviously, they're going to be in the luxury tax. If you remember, Jalen Brunson is an unrestricted free agent going into the summer. He's made himself, at minimum, a $20 million a year player. Now, if you remember, the Mavericks hold his bird right, so they can offer him a 5-year deal versus other teams around the league who can offer him a 4-year deal. So it's going to be, I think, a 9-figure payday for Jalen Brunson, to where he's getting over $20 million and going to get paid in excess of $100 million. That's how good Jalen Brunson's been so far in these playoffs. Again, for Christopher Jones here on YouTube, Jason Kidd knows the team concept instead of the two or the player star concept, and they're winning with the team concept. Look, I'll be the first to tell you and admit to you, I wasn't feeling the Jason Kidd hire when they initially hired him here in Dallas. He had proven and stopped so far before coming to Dallas, in Milwaukee and in Brooklyn, that things turned south pretty quick. And I don't know if he was necessarily good at his job, but you give him a lot of credit. All the things that he learned being assistant for a couple of years when he was out in Los Angeles with the Los Angeles Lakers, winning an NBA championship with the Lakers, learning from Frank Vogel, who has now, of course, been unceremoniously fired by the Los Angeles Lakers. He learned a lot there and has taken all of that and is bringing that here to the Dallas Mavericks when it comes to his learnings. Obviously, it's going to be interesting to see what happens going forward for them and what it looks like as far as the playoffs are concerned and what they're doing for Jason Kidd, this team, and the Dallas Mavericks when it comes to Luka Doncic and the rest of these playoffs. But he's been really good for them so far, and that's what I think they're going to continue to do going forward in these playoffs. Jason Kidd has brought a measure of zen to this team, a team that feels very confident in their ability to stay poised in big-time situations. Obviously, it's going to be big for the Dallas Mavericks to be able to be poised in those situations and be able to handle themselves going forward for the rest of the NBA playoffs. That is what Jason Kidd has brought as far as that mentality to the Mavericks so far in these playoffs. And if he can continue to do that, who knows how far this team could actually go in the playoffs. From DJ Jog 31, that's what I want to hear. Big fan of Brunson from Class 5-1. I believe the Mavs can skip quote unquote steps mainly because of Doncic, the Doncic Brunson duo. Kidd is also doing a way better job than Carlisle. That's interesting because I've heard a lot of people say that Jason Kidd is doing a better job than Rick Carlisle. I think he's got them playing much differently and has got them to buy into the defensive end much better than what Rick Carlisle was able to do. Because if you remember last year, Carlisle was trying to get this team to buy in defensively as well. And even at the beginning of this year, Jason Kidd told me specifically, he's like, look, this team wasn't built to play defense. This has been a long process and road for this team to get to the point where they are doing the kind of defensive play that they've seen, not just throughout the regular season, but also into the playoffs. If they can continue to play this well on the defensive end with the rotations, obviously the scrambling, the over communication, all the things that they're doing, this team can find themselves making a surprise run in the Western Conference playoffs. I'm not ready to go toward NBA finals just yet. I'm not even there just yet when it comes to the Western Conference finals. But if certain things break their way, and we've seen so far how injuries have affected the playoffs when it comes to the Phoenix Suns with Devin Booker, obviously Donovan Mitchell dealing with a little bit of injury, Joel Embiid's got a thumb problem, even health and safety protocols have started to distort the playoffs, obviously with Zach LaVine missing due to health and safety protocols, Alex Caruso got a concussion. Like, you can name any number of players that are dealing with injuries in the NBA playoffs and how it's affected. Chris Middleton with the Milwaukee Bucks got a sprained MCL, going to be out the next 2 to 3 weeks. The Mavericks, if they can stay healthy and finish off the Utah Jazz the way that they need to, they could find themselves possibly as deep as the Western Conference Finals. And if they are able to get past what would be the Phoenix Suns, if they can, all bets are off at that point. But the goal, if you're a Mavericks fan this year, is to see this team win a first-round series, and then whatever else happens from there is gravy after that. That is what you should look for if you want a successful season from the Dallas Mavericks, is winning a first-round series, being able to grow and learn together as a group to get them in position to be able to move on. And then, hey, all bets are off from there. From DJ Dog 31 here on YouTube. Kidd has brought poise to the Mavs in late game close games. That is a major difference I see, along with improved defense. Yeah, I agree with that. They've done very well when it comes to clutch situations, their ability to be poised in those situations. Unfortunately, they weren't able to keep that same poise and made some mistakes at the end of game 4. Look, you got a 4-point lead with 39 seconds left in the fourth quarter. Luka Doncic hit a dagger 3 to get him up 4, and you think that game is going to be able to be salted away. But unfortunately, you made some mistakes down the stretch. You weren't able to execute. You didn't get a great shot at the end. Spencer Dinwiddie left it short in game 4. But give them credit for bouncing back in game 5 to put together their most dominant defensive performance of the season and being able to really keep the Utah Jazz from doing anything that they wanted to do offensively. Donovan Mitchell was a negative 38 in game 5. Bogdanovich was a negative 37. They shot 10% from the three-point line. They only got to the free throw line 21 times in game 5, unlike the 42 times they did in game number 4. They were completely stifled on the offensive end by the Dallas Mavericks defense, and you give Jason Kidd, defensive coordinator Sean Sweeney, a lot of credit, and more importantly, guys like Dorian Finney-Smith, Reggie Bullock for locking up guys like Dorian Finney-Smith. Jordan Clarkson's really been the only one in this series to really get his offense going, was able to do so in game number 5 as well, but it really didn't do much of anything because no one else came with him as far as game 5 of the playoffs were concerned. So the Mavericks are in a really good spot right now. They've been a lot of fun to watch. They've been a terrific cover all season. I would hate to see their season end in the first round yet again for the 3rd year in a row, but this time they have home court advantage. And I told you coming into this season that if they were going to find themselves potentially making a surprise run as far as the playoffs were concerned, they needed to get home court advantage in the first round. They were able to secure that. And even if they lose in game 6, they get to come back in their home building in game 7 to be able to try and close out the Utah Jazz. That's the most important thing that you want for this team, is the ability to possibly get on their home floor and to do so in game number 7. They will have that opportunity if they unfortunately go down in game number 6. Let me know your predictions as far as game 6 is concerned. Do you think the Mavericks are going to close them out in game 6, or do you think they come back home for game number 7 to have Luka Doncic to be able to try and put some Luka magic on game number 7? I wouldn't mind seeing a game 7, but I want to see them close this thing out because you don't want anything to happen. Look, anything can happen in a game 7, right? You'd never want to have that opportunity to go by you if you're the Mavericks, be able to take advantage of it. But at the same time, if you don't need game 7, get it done, handle your business on the road, and then go from there and see what you can do. From Classified One on YouTube, Kid even managed to do something, get something out of Porzingis, unlike Carlisle, who almost ruined the guy's career before trading him. That's been one of the more fascinating things that we've seen, that we saw earlier on this year. Jason Kidd talked about wanting to get the most out of Porzingis, getting him back to what he was doing and some of the things in New York. He was able to do some of it, but then they were able to, I guess, rebuild his value enough to the point where they can move on from him, and you're able to split his contract in half by acquiring Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans, who's got to be really good in game 6 myself to think that he's going to be able to help out in this series. For Pat Tolliver here on YouTube, we will close them out. So big confidence in the Mavericks to close them out in game number 6. Again, I hope they do so. It would be fun for them to be able to close them out in game 6 and then be able to see them get ready for round 2. And programming, though, when it comes to the NBA playoffs, if the Dallas Mavericks do not win in game 6 on Thursday, game 7 is on Saturday. If they win and move on to the second round into the Western Conference semis, game 1 of the Western Conference semifinals is that Monday. So it's a short turnaround. So regardless of when the Mavericks get it done in this series, game 1 would be on Monday if they have to go to Phoenix to do so. If the Pelicans somehow find a way to come back and win this series, okay, then they get to come to Dallas. But as things are going right now, the Phoenix Suns are up 3-2, and then going from there, it looks like they'll probably close them out in the series. From DJ Dog 31. Not to be negative, but Luka still has that technical 1-game suspension over it. No, he doesn't. All the things, everything got cleared out and restarted when the playoffs started. So if he gets, any technical fouls, like, it doesn't count toward anything. So he's all good there. So you don't have to worry about that. We were a little concerned about that because Tony Brothers was the official the other night. We know how he likes to get down with the Mavericks, was the only one to throw out Jason Kidd earlier this season. Yeah, from Michael Macy here on YouTube. Yeah, resets in the playoffs. So Doncic is all good. So you don't have to worry about that when it comes to the technical fouls and what he's got to possibly deal with there. So he's all good. Anything that you guys have been talking about, let's see. Harold Victor here on YouTube. Kevin, in this playoffs, what teams have surprised you positively and negatively? What's your prediction based on what you've seen so far from both the East and the West? Oh, boy, that's a great question. I think what surprised me most so far is the wild nature of the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Memphis Grizzlies series. That series has been bonkers so far. Two young teams who have made a lot of mistakes in this series. John Morant, who posterized Malik Beasley the other night. That series has been wild. But I think what has surprised me most is how injuries have taken a toll on these playoffs so far. We mentioned Devin Booker, obviously Chris Middleton with the hamstring and the MCL injury. Obviously, what's going on with Dallas and Luka Doncic missing the first 3 games of the series, although that happened at the end of the regular season, still had an effect on the playoffs as far as the Mavericks were concerned. Joel Embiid dealing with a thumb injury. And of course, I think what's been most surprising, especially in the Eastern Conference, the way that the Boston Celtics just absolutely dismantled the Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets couldn't even win a game in their series. Jason Tatum was absolutely phenomenal. From a player standpoint, that was the most surprising, was seeing how well Jason Tatum was able to deal with Kevin Durant, and on both ends of the floor, how he was able to take it to Durant in 4 consecutive wins as far as the Celtics winning over the Brooklyn Nets. They've got a lot of things they got to figure out. Joe Harris, who dealt with a lot of injuries, the 3-point sniper for them, Kyrie Irving, has said that he's going to resign with the Brooklyn Nets. We'll see if he follows through on his word there. Will Steve Nash be back as the head coach going into this next season for them? Because he's got a lot to answer for by the fact that they couldn't get out of the first round themselves at Harold Victor here on YouTube. Boston looking scary right now. They are looking scary. They've got a really good game plan night in and night out. Defensively, they're going to get after you. They got the NBA's Defensive Player of the Year there. They've got a lot going good for them as far as the Celtics are concerned. Michael Macy here on YouTube. Hey, Kevin, would you rather see the Pelicans versus the Mavs or the Suns versus the Mavs in the second round? How long will Booker be out? Booker right now is said to be out 2 to 3 weeks with the hamstring injury. Could he be back sooner? You never want to play around with the hamstring injuries. You never know how those things will respond. Obviously, we'll see how that affects the Suns. I mean, obviously, if you want the easiest route to the Western Conference Finals, theoretically, it's the New Orleans Pelicans. Now, Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum have been really good in this series for them for the most part. But if you're wanting a first round, or if you're wanting to see a team in the next round, I mean, I'm going to take the New Orleans Pelicans because you don't want to face the defending Western Conference champions in terms of the Phoenix Suns, even without Devin Booker. Chris Paul, who's been the complete floor general that he is, 37 years old, the ageless one, still getting it done for the Phoenix Suns, was really good in Game 5 to get them up 3-2 as they look to close out the New Orleans Pelicans. From DJ Dog 31, the Nets do not play defense. No, they don't. And they got, look, Ime Udoka, the head coach for the Boston Celtics, knows that organization backwards and forwards. And you saw how well he had game plans ready for the Brooklyn Nets to be able to take care of them. And they did so in 4 games. I think that's my most surprising when it comes to what we've seen so far from Pat Tyler, our first Kevin Gray Live. And it's great. Awesome job. Oh, appreciate that. Thank you. Appreciate that. Again, you can subscribe right here to Kevin Gray Sports on YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports. If you want to drop a super chat in there, you can do that as well. Drop a super sticker in there so you can have your comment moved up to the top so that I can read it and have some interaction here, right here on YouTube. Again, this is the Gray Area Podcast live on YouTube. Trying something new. This is my first one. Wanted to see how it goes. And obviously, you can subscribe to the Gray Area Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts for free. And make sure that you write a review and give it a 5-star rating while you're there. So we had an episode drop yesterday. This episode, which is live on YouTube, and of course will be available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts for free. And then also we'll have our Interview Friday episode, which you can also find wherever you get your podcasts for free, from Harold Victor on YouTube. Please tell us the rumors of Rudy in Dallas are fake. That was a report earlier this postseason and right before the postseason started from ESPN's Tim McMahon about the idea of Rudy Gobert playing in Dallas. So don't get mad at me, but Rudy Gobert would be a perfect fit here in Dallas. He really would. Look, I know Rudy Gobert, when it comes to how things are happening in Utah, a guy I was talking to during Game 5 said, look, Donovan Mitchell doesn't like Rudy Gobert at all. But with Rudy Gobert, you've got a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. Luka Doncic would make things super easy for him on the offensive end, and then he would be a terrific defensive anchor for you on the defensive end. I think he would assimilate into the locker room well. I think they've built a really nice locker room culture in Dallas to where I don't think his personality would affect what they've got going on there. Luka Doncic is the unquestioned dude in Dallas. Rudy Gobert would have to prove that he can fit in with what this team is doing, and the defensive game plans that the Dallas Mavericks would be able to put out with Rudy Gobert on the floor would be monstrous. So as much as a lot of people don't like Rudy Gobert, he would be a perfect fit in Dallas for what they do in terms of the pick and roll stuff. If Luka Doncic can make Dwight Powell as effective as he is, imagine Rudy Gobert catching lobs from Luka Doncic all night long, and more importantly, being the best defensive player on the floor for them. And then you put that with the perimeter defense of Reggie Bullock, Dorian Finney-Smith, and others. Rudy Gobert would actually be a perfect fit in Dallas. Now, the question is about the money. You would be paying another max player. Luka Doncic's rookie max extension kicks in at the beginning of this upcoming year. You would have a lot to deal with when it comes to the money there. So that would be my take when it comes to Rudy Gobert and the Dallas Mavericks. I like it. I think it would work, but you'd have to see how it works out. From DJ Dog 31, enjoy your shows with Brian Broaddus. Oh, yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, I love doing the Boys Collective. That's on our 105 Through the Fan YouTube page. The show that I do with Brian Broaddus there. Appreciate you enjoying that. I have a lot of fun doing that show. Obviously, with things coming with the NFL draft and going into the rest of the offseason with OTAs, training camp coming up this upcoming summer, there's going to be a lot to talk about when it comes to that. Another Mavs question here from Classify One. Kevin, what do you think of Bertans so far? I'd say he's been okay, at times impressive. Definitely a deadly shooter, but an inconsistent one. I would agree with that assessment. You know, Davis Bertans is a guy, every time I've watched him play, and every time I've watched him when it comes to his warm-ups, it appears that his shot's going to go in every single time. And, you know, he's a really, really good shooter, especially from the corners, but he's got to be good in this series. He's got to be better. As if the Mavericks continue to go deeper into the playoffs, he's got to be much better for them going forward. But I definitely agree with that assessment. He's been really good at times as a deadly shooter from the three-point line, but it's definitely been inconsistent. You're not going to get anything from him defensively. He's a liability defensively when it comes to on that side of the floor. But as a shooter, one of the best in the NBA, one of the reasons why you don't mind possibly paying him $15-16 million, what he's getting paid right now, especially if he can be effective, but he's got to be more effective going forward. From the BS3 Network, what's up, Kevin? Hey, what's up, Ben? Good to see you, man, here. 105, or excuse me, the Gray Area Podcast right here, live on YouTube. Again, you can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports. Subscribe to the Gray Area Podcast, wherever you get your podcast for free. Make sure you're hitting that subscribe button here on YouTube. My first live show here on my YouTube page when it comes to doing this. I appreciate all the interaction we've had so far. Again, subscribe to Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube, DJ Dog 31. Bertans threat really helps spread the floor. Yeah, it does. That's why you want him to see him be better in this series, is because of the threat that he is from the three-point line. And if you can get that on a much more consistent basis, you're going to find yourself being in a lot of ball games going forward. From Harold, Dorian Finney-Smith, Reggie Bullock cannot leave Dallas. No, they're not going to. I mean, and Dorian Finney-Smith just got his deal, you know, the 4-year, $55 million deal. He's not going anywhere. Reggie Bullock signed a 3-year deal. He's not going anywhere. They love what both of them obviously bring from a defensive standpoint. We know how deadly Dorian Finney-Smith is when it comes to the three-point shooting, especially from the corners. Reggie Bullock, the same when he's on. Both of those guys really turn things around defensively when it comes to their perimeter defense and how well that they can guard guys night in and night out. So those two are not going anywhere. Obviously, those guys are going to be important going forward. As we mentioned, Jalen Brunson is the guy that you got to worry about and trying to keep him. My man, Panda Hank 41. What's up, man? Appreciate you joining us here on the Gray Area Podcast here on YouTube, talking some Mavericks. Go subscribe to Panda Hank 41 on YouTube. My man does his thing. His highlight videos are amazing. Love when you tag me in them so I can watch them and make sure I didn't miss anything from the game. Obviously, even though I sat there and watched the game, my man has all the highlights and is always there dropping them on Twitter and whatnot. So Panda Hank 41, make sure you go subscribe to his YouTube page. He does. If you're a Mavericks fan and you love the Dallas Mavericks, if you're an MFFL, that's a page and that you got to subscribe to, Panda Hank 41. I appreciate you joining us here, the Gray Area Podcast live right here on YouTube. From DJ Dog 31, Dwight Powell still makes me nervous. Yeah, look, I'm not gonna lie to you. I was one of the ones that maligned Dwight Powell quite a bit throughout the years, but he's extremely effective, man. Him and Luka Doncic, when they do their thing really well. So, that's what it is. From Pat Tolliver, hit the like button. 27 of us watch it, only 15 likes. Come on, yeah, hit that like button, man. Make sure you hit that like button so more people can see the videos and stuff dropping here on YouTube. So if you're in here, make sure you hit the like button. Also, hit that subscribe button while you're there as well here on YouTube. Again, I appreciate everyone joining me here right here on the Gray Area Podcast Live as I'm trying to work my way through this. Again, want to do more live content for you guys. You guys have really supported me. I really appreciate it. If you don't know who I am, radio host for 105 through the Fan, do a lot of stuff when it comes to covering the Mavericks, obviously talking a lot about the Cowboys, a lot of stuff going on between the Cowboys and the Dallas Mavericks this season and what's going on there. Let's see. From Tony Wynn, love Gobert's defense, but not at $41 million a year and on the wrong side of 30. Any cheaper center options this offseason? Good question. Have to look at the free agency class this upcoming summer. Not a great free agency class, honestly. That's why Jalen Brunson is going to be at the top of it, because it's not really a great class this summer. I have to get back to you on that, because I haven't really paid attention too much to the center class this offseason, excuse me. Once the NBA season is over, we'll see who's available. But look, Gobert on the wrong side of 30, I get it. The defense that you love from him, you're going to get that from him. But when it comes to the price tag, again, we talked about how Luka Doncic's rookie max is going to kick in at the beginning of this upcoming season. If you trade for him, who are you trading? What kind of salaries are you getting to match that? And then obviously having to pay two max players, that's going to be interesting to watch. Now, whether you pair, obviously a first round draft pick, a couple of players, whether it be, maybe a Tim Hardaway, a Bertans, a Dinwiddie, trying to get salaries to match and work to be able to get a guy like Rudy Gobert here. There's a lot of different things you can do, but at the same time, I get the concern with him being on the other side of 30 and why you may not necessarily want to make that deal. I personally would try to find a way to make it happen, because I'm thinking about how well him and Luka Doncic on the offensive end in pick and roll situations and him getting easy buckets would be for the Dallas Mavericks. And then, of course, defensively, what you're going to get from a 3-time defensive player of the year. And I think he'll be just fine when it comes to the whole locker room situation. If you're concerned about how he would fit, knowing how the relationship soured between him and Donovan Mitchell when it comes to their relationship. From Harold, Miles Turner, a good option for us. It was a lot of flirtation with Miles Turner, especially when we were talking about the trade deadline back in February, about what he could be possibly for the Mavericks. He's a really good shot blocker, has turned himself into a good 3-point shooter. The the injuries that he's been dealing with kind of concern you going forward. He should be healthy, obviously, going into next year. I appreciate you hit that like button here on the video for Kevin Gray Sports right here, the Gray Area Podcast Live here on YouTube. So we'll see with Miles Turner, but he's been dealing with a little bit of injury, and obviously a guy who is from the DFW area would be a homecoming for him if he came back, obviously, to Dallas, but we'll see when it comes to that. Kevin, regardless of what the media are saying, who's your MVP if you had to at least pick a top 3? Oh, boy, great question. I'm going to go Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, Giannis as my top 3. Luka comes in at number 4 for me. The reason why I have Luka at 4, came in with a slow start. If he had played as well as he did during the second half all year long, he would probably be my front runner. But Denver is literally nothing without Nikola Jokic. We all know about the offensive numbers, how they're off the chart, the analytics, all the deep dive numbers that you want to go to with Nikola Jokic. It comes down to this. They are literally nothing without him. No Jamal Murray this year again. No Michael Porter Jr., who continues to deal with significant injuries. Nikola Jokic is the Denver Nuggets, and the only reason why they made the playoffs as a 6th seed at that and were not even in the play-in tournament was because of him. He is the definition of the most valuable player. Joel Embiid had a phenomenal year. First center to lead the NBA in scoring since Shaq. Obviously, Giannis closed the second half. Super strong. Fantastic close for him. Reigning defending NBA champion Milwaukee Bucks and what they did during the second half of the year. But for my money, it's Nikola Jokic, Embiid, then Giannis, then Luka at number 4 as far as my MVP is concerned. Again, you can do a deep dive on all the numbers and the analytics when it comes to Nikola Jokic, the passing, the scoring, the usage rate, the offensive percentage that he generates, the offense that he generates for them. He's phenomenal. And he's the reason why the Nuggets are in the playoffs and the sole reason why they're in the playoffs. Nikola Jokic is my NBA's MVP yet again. And that's no shade to what Embiid did. That's no shade to obviously what Giannis did. And again, if Luka had played the way that he did all season long, the way that he did, especially in the final 2.5 months of the season, he would be at the top of my list for NBA's MVP. But great question there. Yeah, it's Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, Giannis Antetokounmpo for my NBA's MVP this year. So we'll see. Luka Doncic should be a heavy favorite, just like it was coming into this year. Should be a heavy favorite going into next year for league MVP. Let's see if he can get off to a better start. Let's see if he can come into camp in shape going into next year to put himself in a position where he's not dealing with any kind of potential nagging injuries that could get him off to a slow start going into this upcoming season. So we'll see for Luka Doncic. Regardless, though, man, it's been a fun NBA playoff so far. The series have been fantastic. Obviously, the Toronto Raptors staving off elimination. They've got another chance to, try to push it to a game 7. Obviously, the Timberwolves and what the Grizzlies are doing. Ja Morant with the dunk of the year so far in this postseason. Obviously, the Golden State Warriors and their death lineup when it comes to Jordan Poole and Klay Thompson, Stephen Curry, Draymond Green. They look like they're a real championship contender as well. From Classify 1, I get what you're saying. Jokic is sadly playing. Exactly. Almost got swept, even though Jokic is the most consistent player in the NBA. And he is. He's the most consistent player that you watch around the NBA, and the reason why the Denver Nuggets are where they are. Michael Malone should be thankful that he's got Nikola Jokic on his basketball team, because otherwise that team would not be anywhere near the playoffs, let alone not even having to play in the play-in tournament. It was because of Nikola Jokic. But obviously, the way that the Boston Celtics dismantled the Brooklyn Nets, the Miami Heat getting the Atlanta Hawks out of the playoffs as well. Trae Young had more turnovers than he did field goals in his series against the Miami Heat. Did not play well at all as far as that was concerned. But the big news, the Dallas Mavericks have a chance to close out their first round series on Thursday against the Utah Jazz on the road. Can they do it? Can they win their first series since 2011? We're going to find out on Thursday night. It should be a great night, obviously, with the Cowboys drafting at number 24. Maybe they move up. The NFL draft itself getting started on Thursday night. There's going to be a lot that's going to be going on when it comes to the world of sports. The NHL season's winding its way down. Talk a little Stars. Can the Stars hang on to their wild card spot? Looks like they're going to make the playoffs. Their first round matchup, it appears, is going to be against the Colorado Avalanche. So, yeah, your boy dabbles in a little bit of hockey, too, when it comes to the NHL playoffs. So we'll see how that goes and going forward for the rest of this season. So, look, it should be a lot of fun going into the rest of the NFL draft, obviously the NBA playoffs, and we'll see what we got here. Anyway, keep up the good work. Got to go to bed. It's almost 1 a.m. here in France. Oh, wow. People in France tuning in. Thank you so much for tuning in. Ciao. Good night. Have a good night's sleep. Appreciate you joining me here on the Gray Area Podcast here on YouTube. Look, we're going to get out of here. What's the score of Game 6? Oh, that's a good question. I'm going to go Mavericks 102, Jazz 98. How about that for a score? That's the way we'll end it. I'm going to take the Mavericks 102-98 in Game 6. We'll see if they close it out in Game 6 on Thursday. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports. Subscribe to Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube. You can download and subscribe to the podcast. This will be made available in podcast form on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts for free. Again, you can find me on all social media platforms, Kevin Gray Sports, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Subscribe to Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube. You can check out my website, kevingraysports.com. And again, the Gray Area Podcast, wherever you get your podcast for free. Give me a 5-star rating, write a review while you're there, and appreciate you tuning in. We'll do this. I'm trying to get a schedule together on how often I'll do this. I'll try to do it at least 3 times a week to where it's live, to where you can see the live show here, the Gray Area Podcast. Oh, man, appreciate the super chat, man. Make sure I throw that in there real quick. Q-Dog, happy that you are going live. Appreciate that, man. Yeah, appreciate you dropping the super chat. in there for a couple bucks, man. That means a lot to me. That really does mean a lot to me. You really have no idea how much that means to me that you dropped that super chat in there. You can also find me again on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports. Subscribe to Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube. And I'll get the schedule out to when I can do this so that way you guys can participate and tune in. Make sure you hit the like button on this video. And I think I've closed like 3 times now. So I'm going to get out of here. Have a good night. We'll talk to you later. This has been the Gray Area Podcast live here on YouTube. Again, my name is Kevin Gray right here on Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube. I'll talk to you later. Peace.